Hey class, welcome back. We are in week 6, which means we're past, we're kind of like in the first third of, which means we're about a third of the way through the course. We are going to be transitioning into Frankenstein next week. I gave us kind of a cushion week because I know we were working hard on our Area X assignments last week, or maybe you won't feel like it's a cushion week because I did assign 2 essays, but we get to watch X-Files, and that's always a good thing, at least for me. I always enjoy to watch the X-Files, except for when I was a little kid. It scared me. There was an episode where a man reanimated back from just a metal spine, and that freaked me out. But then I became an adult and realized how cute Dana Scully is, and my fears went away. Anyways, on to, well, I'm not sure, more important things. More important to you, certainly. Here are our weekly questions from the quiz last week that I'll go through, and then we didn't do a discussion last week, but I did have some really good answers from the quiz I wanted to go over and shout some students out and kind of point out some things I really liked about them that should apply everywhere in the course. So with that, we will dive in. So the first one is, my first question is in regard to future big projects like our Area X one. I enjoyed having the creative freedom that this assignment had allowed. Will future projects be like this? I'm assuming we'll do another big assignment for our next novel. Yes and no. We are going to be shifting more towards original essays, but I really do try to allow you a lot of freedom within those. So our essay that's going to be focused on Frankenstein is going to be an argumentative essay. So you're going to really argue for your point of view as you see it using some resources, mostly the text, maybe 1 or 2 outside resources. And then from there, the final third of this course, so that's the middle third of this course, is kind of opens up into more or less a sandbox, which is to say, I'm going to be providing you with a very loose structure, and you are going to be more or less on your own, doing your own self-guided research. Quasi-self-guided research. I'll still be assigning some things for you to read, but it will open up and you will be writing a research paper on a topic of your choosing insofar as it relates to post-humanism. So that's where we are going with that. So a little more structured in terms of the kind of thing we're trying to write, but as creatively free as the assignment allows. I hope that makes sense. I like this one. One question I have is, by the end of the semester, what are 3 things you want a student to be confident in from this class? So the first thing is, I want you to feel as though you have developed as a reader and a writer. We all kind of come into this class from different spots. Some students are, kind of on their back leg and writing isn't their strong suit. So I'm really trying to get those students to feel like they are confident writers in any class they go into. I want them to feel as though when they are assigned a writing assignment, they have the skills and abilities to do so with confidence. And for writers who are already very good, I'm trying to kind of get you to think critically about the next steps. It's almost harder for me to get a good writer to the next level of their writing abilities than it is to take someone who isn't maybe the strongest writer and get them to a competent level. There's this idea called the 80-20 rule, which is you can get, for any skill set, you can get 80% good at it with 20% of the work. And that final 20% of skill is where 80% of the work comes in. So really, I'm trying to get us all to that 80% of skill competency with our reading and writing skills. Another thing, number 2, I want us to get into is have an understanding of writing in genre and writing particular kinds of things, right? So we've been really focused on the kinds of genre we're reading and the conventions of those genre. Post-humanism and deals with certain ideas. Weird fiction approaches fear in a certain way, and they write about the unknown in a certain way. And science fiction deals with a certain subject matter and writes about in a certain way. So part of my job is to teach you about genre and teach you how to write within a genre, and also to teach you how to write certain kinds of things, right? So I also need you to leave this class with the ability to write a research essay. That's really what composition is all about. English 101, 102 is about writing the college essay. Older I get, the more I realize that it is something, a skill set that has provided a lot of value for me. I think it's easy to think like, when it's kind of like the math, like, oh, when will I ever need the quadratic equation? It's not really about knowing the quadratic equation as much as it is, one, learning to think about things in a certain kind of way, learning to training your mind to think in a new pattern. But I'd also say the essay structure that we really learn in here is applicable outside of this class. That's why I had us doing cover letters. You'll find that when you are writing emails, you'll kind of fall back on the structure of like, hey, here's a point, here's supporting arguments, here's a so what to do about it. So I want you to get really good at the research essay, which is what we're going to move into next. Don't mind me. I'm just having my tea. It helps my throat not get crabby while I'm recording these lectures. So first one, general reading, writing comprehension, general increase of your reading, writing skills. Second one, I really want you to be able to nail writing college level essay and really internalize that writing structure, because it's going to be incredibly important, both for the next year or so as you're studying at the community college, but more importantly, when you go out to the world and you need to start advocating for yourself. Being able to write persuasively, clearly, and coherently is one of the most important skills you can have in any job. So lastly is process. And I guess this is kind of a rehash of number one, but in a different way. I want us to understand that reading and writing are both processes and not one-stop shops, right? A lot of you have come in thinking that you read something and you understand it or you don't. You write something and then that is what you turn in, you just fix the punctuation. Where the development and creation of meaning, as I've said a few times, is a process. So I want you to have, when we leave this class, a greater understanding of your own personal processes for reading and writing. And that's a little different than comprehension and competency that I was talking about. My first thing I want you to have a takeaway. This is more about knowing how your brain works, whether it's generating meaning with text or generating your own meanings with your own original writings. So those are the three things I really want us to focus on. Buried in there is, development of sentence structure, development of personal voice, but all of these things kind of fall into place when you know how you like to write and how you like to read. Good question. Question 3. Can you use ChatGPT or AI to copy and paste a passage from a book to decipher what they're saying? I have trouble realizing hidden meanings sometimes in readings and wonder if resources like this would be helpful to a student trying to gain meaning from a story rather than writing about it. I would push back on this idea of hidden meanings. It's a very high school English way of thinking about things, where you read a poem and uncovering what it's about is kind of like a puzzle, and if you didn't get it right away, you're made to feel like you're not good at this, where the people who picked up on the clues right away got it and they're good at this. I don't really like that line of thinking, and that's kind of going back to what I was just talking about with reading being a process. Any meaning you will get from a text is a meaning that you create between yourself and the text. There's this idea in literature called reader response criticism, and it is the idea that meaning is a relationship that is created between a reader and a text. The text doesn't necessarily have an inherent single meaning. It kind of has like a gravity of possible meanings. There's kind of a loose, nebulous core of meaning, but meaning occurs between you and a text. It's kind of a relationship. It's how you respond to the text, reader response. So I would say at the same time, ChatGPT can be a tool to help you do so if you are really stumped and you're not comprehending what you are reading. But it also gets into a sticky situation where you end up having to trust the program, and it might be wrong. So it is possible, but also the person who's like best suited to use ChatGPT in this way is someone who is already at a high enough level where they can differentiate between what ChatGPT is saying and whether or not it's good or not. But that might be too like English teacher of me thinking that we all have these unique general or unique meetings and everything is great. So let's actually try this out. I have this book I read earlier this year. One of my niche interests in reading is I like to read stuff about like magic and mysticism. This is a book on Hermeticism. And despite reading all of it, I couldn't tell you exactly what it's about. I will need to read it a few more times. And it turns out this guy, he's a fascist turd, but he knows a lot about the Hermetic tradition. So I'm going to pull a random paragraph from here. I probably have some question marks in here somewhere. So I'm going to look for a question mark. I'm going to put it into ChatGPT and see if it can help me understand it. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so I just posted a like kind of dense paragraph from that book. The paragraph in question is, thus in alchemy we encounter a duplication. Saturn is the ancient and the divine or sulphurous, and at the same time it is inverted gold. Lead is the vulgar body. It is the father of our stone and that of the philosophers, in which according to De Pharmaco Catholico is manifested as cosmic spirit, and a body with and spirit nature comparable to arsenic, that is, to the virile power par excellence. Boehme explains that lead and gold are produced in Saturn by the same power and adds, it is not death but an enclosure that represents the celestial divine essence. I don't know. Ignore my typos in there. I'm going quick. So, they answer, this passage is pretty dense because it is filled with alchemical symbolism, which often blends spiritual, philosophical, and physical concepts. Let's break this down piece by piece. I like where this is heading. So then it goes, Saturn symbol gives me a little bit about Saturn, often associated with the metal lead, the lowest of heavy metals. It's also seen as a key figure for transformation. When it says it's sulphurous and inverted gold, it's referring to the duality that exists within Saturn. Then it gives me what sulfur is, what gold is. It gives me idea what this father of the stone is referring to. Gives me a breakdown kind of by point. It lets me know who Jacob Boehme is, which is important if you don't know who that is. And then it gives me a summary that says, the passage is discussing Saturn as both a physical and spiritual entity in alchemy. It represents the base metal lead, but it also contains the divine potential to transform into gold, spiritually and physically. This process of transformation is central to the alchemical and hermetic philosophy, where what seems lowly or imperfect like lead actually holds potential for spiritual perfection. The references to cosmic spirit and arsenic emphasize powerful, virile, transformative energy within the alchemical process. I actually do think this is relatively helpful because it's just giving me more information about the text without really telling me how I should be thinking about it. So in a way, this is a tool that's helping me kind of translate this into easier words than necessarily telling me what to think about it. So I actually do think this is kind of a useful process if you're reading something that is really stumping you. It kind of is a SparkNotes version, which is kind of a bad word in English, SparkNotes, but it's a useful tool for you to generate your own meaning. So I guess my pedagogical point was, yes, this can absolutely help you unpack things, and if you're really not understanding things, I think it's a great tool. But you need to go then and reflect and bring that back into the original thing you're reading. So it can't be used as a way to circumvent the reading process, but it can be a way to supplement your reading process, which I think is an important distinction here. As with any tool, it's really about how you use it. But yeah, that was a great question, and I think that was a useful way to kind of encounter that. So this is talking about the last lecture. In this week's lecture, you discussed a little bit about different types of writing processes and how each student can be a little different. In mine, for some reason, I have to write everything down on paper first and then type it. I notice as I type it, I kind of also edit as I go. I don't know why it is challenging me to go straight to typing, but I found it is difficult for me to formulate my ideas that way. I feel like that because it takes a lot of time to complete an assignment. My question is, do you think this is a hard or long way of doing things? What have you found in your improved writing process that has helped make your process better? So I actually love this question. Why? Because when I first started writing poetry, I wrote everything out by hand, and I actually followed this exact process. And it was doing this exact thing, that was something that was incredibly useful for me. But that's not going to be the same for anyone, or the true for everyone. But in my English 101 class, I actually do have a whole section with the way I ran it last time, where we go through the process of free writing something by hand and then putting it into type and then continuing to edit it. So is this the hard or long way of doing things? Yes, but that's why it is improving your writing process. And this thing you're talking about, I notice as I type, I kind of also edit as I go. If you're really paying attention to what you edit as you go, you start when you're writing to start weeding those things out, or at least that's something I started to do, because you get sick of editing them, right? So I actually love this writing process, and it's something I teach sometimes. It's not necessarily for everyone, but I really do think writing something down on paper with your hand, it does something different. In fact, kind of going back to poetry, I used to fill journals with handwritten copies of other people's poems. And I would really recommend trying to write down quotes from authors you really like. If you're into writing and you really want to get to that next level, start handwriting long sections of other people's writings with your own hand. That was something that moved my writing ahead by a couple years. Question 5. I'm very curious about the Frankenstein reading coming up. What was your reason for choosing it? What was your reasoning for choosing this? Will we be comparing the writings of like Darko Suvan and Lovecraft's idea of science fiction, or is this going to be completely different? So I chose Frankenstein for a few reasons. One, I think part of my job as an English teacher is to introduce you to important books that you might not read otherwise. And this book has had a major cultural influence on not just the like popular culture horror side of things, but also in the way we think about things. A lot of our anxieties about technology were first kind of codified in Frankenstein, at least in terms of our current Western cultural idea, earlier notions of post-humanity. But I think in terms of where we are with science, and science being a thing that has the potential to get away from us, this is kind of the textbook for that, and this course. So that's why we read it, and it also sets the stage for the final research unit for this class. As you already know, by now, in theory, the essays I assigned this week cover the idea of the science fiction Gothic. I'm pretty sure I haven't reread the essays I assigned this week yet, but if memory serves, they are actually where I first found out about Darko Suvan when I was researching this class a while ago. And that led me to eventually track down Suvan's essay, because it was actually kind of difficult to find. Lovecraft's more or less done, but as we're exploring the science fiction Gothic, they will definitely talk about science fiction. So yeah, good question. And last one, this is a real short question. Do you have experience with the Writing Center at NIC for students receiving feedback? Would that be a good resource? Yeah, I've worked in writing centers for like 10 years and I love them. I think they're incredibly useful. And I work at the Writing Center on Tuesdays from 5 to 7. If you ever want to pop in and go over anything, I'd be happy to do that. So I would also recommend getting someone else's point of view and someone else's eyes on your writing. So the quiz questions. Based on what you learned in Sam Allen's essay Surrounding the Self about posthumanism, would you say Bradbury's There Will Come Soft Rains and The Shape of Things deal with the themes of posthumanism? Why or why not? So here I'm asking you to apply some ideas that we learned about in an essay a couple of weeks back to two new stories. Ray Bradbury's There Will Come Soft Rains, which is a super sad story where you feel bad for a house. The Shape of Things, which is a kind of weird, funny story about a baby who's born as a pyramid. through the use of a bunch of bizarre machines. So here's a couple answers I liked and what I liked about them. One person said, "There Will Come Soft Rains was a bit challenging for me to read. It resembled a long poem for me. It is really kind of written in like these short kind of stanza-esque images." Good observation there. The description of a home with rain washing the dishes and the counter is making meals, then all of a sudden there is a fire wiping everything out. I would say if I'm looking at this particular writing from a post-human perspective, then possibly the story could resemble the end of the world. I like that idea. I do believe this was supposed to be futuristic due to it having ended in the due to the ending having a date year of 2026. It is really kind of like apocalyptic. I thought that was an interesting thing because a lot of post-humanism kind of really does end with this idea of apocalypse at least, or Armageddon for at least humans in one way, shape, or form. And then we're experiencing the second one as these machines kind of continue on. It's very haunting, I guess. Post-rapture, in a way, I guess is a way of thinking of something kind of biblically, right? There's sort of rapture connotation there. With the shape of things, this story definitely fit the post-humanism theme, with the main couple having a baby in the wrong dimension. Now having to take care of a whistling blue pyramid came as a shock to me as a reader. I kept trying to find a deeper meaning to this story may have been referencing. The story feels futuristic in the way modern technology has begun to control our lives, such as the birthing mechanisms referenced in the story. It may fit the post-humanism theme this way, because humans are being made by machines and technology in this particular story. I think that's a smart observation. The machinification of the birthing process is definitely a very common theme. We didn't really see that in Annihilation, right? But in Brave New World, that happens. In The Matrix, that's kind of one of the central themes is humans are no longer born, they are made. So yeah, I thought that was a smart observation. I would have liked a couple more quotes in here, but the ideas here were good, and I like to see that. Answer 2. I would say that both There Will Come Soft Rains and The Shape of Things deal with post-humanism. I really like that clear statement up front, just telling me exactly what you're thinking. It's kind of a topic sentence, right? And then it's the controlling idea for the paragraph. In The Shape of Things, it has to do with a couple having a blue pyramid baby instead of a human one. The real baby got born into another dimension. This goes along with how Vandermeer emphasizes Annihilation, that not one species an individual, and there could be some consideration about the post-human. In this setting, there's another dimension, and it has what Peter and Polly want. It's hard to even imagine that there is another dimension, but this story is a definite possibility. Sam Allen's writing also mentioned that one of Donna Haraway's writings, it requires an acknowledgement of that which is unknown as absolving of human constructions and identities. I really like that you pulled in that quote from Donna Haraway. The other dimension consisted of shapes instead of humans. This had to acknowledge the situation they were unluckily put in. In the end, it was revealed that the pyramid baby did have shapes as parents. And this story dove deep into the unknown and how there could be something beyond Earth. So these like non-human life forms, definitely a post-human theme. In There Will Come Soft Rains, the story is based around a house. There is a sort of technology in the house that keeps it running without anyone occupying it. This has to do with post-humanism because in this story it makes you believe that the house will be able to continue to function on without people. Good. In the end, the house dies. Super sad. It just goes to show you that technology can do many things but not save us. It could not save humans. Sam Allen wrote, emphasizing the interactions, connections, and evolutions between living things and non-living beings extend beyond human and will continue after our extinction. That emphasizes the lesson in this story. Even though the house owners are dead, technology or the living house can continue to function until something kills it too. That second quote and this part really drives the themes of post-humanism home. A small thing is, you can also up here, sorry to do some editing publicly, it kind of got clunky there referring to Sam Allen's writings and Donna Haraway's writings. When we're talking about an author, and if they say something, you don't have to say their writing said it, you can just say they said it. So a small edit, just by way of clarity. Sam Allen also mentioned another theorist, Donna Haraway, who wrote, it requires an acknowledgement of that which is unknown and absolving of human constructions, right? So that's a small edit here. Sorry to edit you out in public. But hey, it was probably useful for everyone. Answer 3. Bradbury's There Will Come Soft Rains and The Shape of Things do relate around themes of posthumanism. Another one where we just have a clear telling me your overall idea up front, super helpful. In There Will Come Soft Rains, the outline of the story is laid out in timestamps with actions following. During one of the timestamps, we read that the mechanical mice run around the house cleaning messes up. While this could seem like not a major posthumanism theme, we then read how all the animals are like this, machines. I would do a little colon there, or dash. You know I love my dashes. They're all programmed in a certain way, like how the mice are programmed as cleaners, right? This idea of programming is interesting. This relates to Sam Allen's essay about posthumanism, in which he argues our understanding of identity and existence is challenged by technological and cultural shifts. This is a little unclear here, but then the author brings it home a little later. For Bradbury's The Shape of Things, we read about a mother who does not go through natural process of birth, but does so by using machines. However, where this goes wrong is when the birthing machines send the baby to another dimension. This relates to posthumanism because the technical advancement have taken over natural reproductive processes, which can be considered a cultural shift. So this author, it wasn't maybe stated as clearly, but I liked this focus on the technological and cultural shifts that posthuman ideas often take. These mice are robot mice, so they're not animals anymore, which I guess is kind of a thought of like the house is no longer human area. And they're programmed to be cleaners. And then this technological advancement and has made a cultural shift over the birthing process. Good stuff. Okay, so quiz question 4. While writing on similar themes and in the same genre, Jeffrey Vandermeer and Ray Bradbury both have very different voices. That is, when we read them, and for reading closely, we notice that they make different stylistic choices. They interact with their reader in different ways, and they make us feel different things. By selecting a quote of your choosing from each, Vandermeer and Ray Bradbury, compare and contrast their writing styles. What do they do similarly and what do they do differently? Who do you like better? So simple, really at the heart of this is a compare and contrast that I'm asking you to focus specifically on, really at a sentence level, how these writers do different things. Though some of us kind of looked at a more top-down approach, which was totally valid too. Answer 1. The first thing I notice in both Vandermeer and Bradbury's writing is that they use many sentence fragments. Again, answer right up front. In The Shape of Things, when they talked about the baby, that's where I saw it the most. She's dead and it weighs 7 pounds 8 ounces, someone said. There was no subject. That's not quite true. Point of clarification here. She's dead is the subject, she. It weighs 7 pounds 8 ounces. It. These are pronouns, so they're taking place of the subject. But I think what you're pointing out here, and she's dead is a complete sentence, subject, verb. But what I think you're pointing out here is not necessarily the sentence fragments, but the shortness of the sentence and the detachment of the speaker, right? So a little terminology here, but the thing you're noticing is very good. On Annihilation, the biologist is asked by her husband where she goes all night. Really, before they go nowhere. I said everywhere. What's different about their writing is I think Vandermeer's writing is easier to understand than Bradbury's. I think he structures it better, so you'll understand what is going on, but it keeps you guessing. I had a harder time with Bradbury. I think his writing has a lot going on at once with his characters, which made it harder for me to understand. And that's totally valid. Even though you're always kind of put out by the biologist, you always know how she feels, where Bradbury's characters are emotionally complex. To disagree with you here, not that you're wrong, I like the emotional complexity of Bradbury's because it feels a little more rooted in the human, but it does make them harder to understand. So I hear where you're coming from. Answer 2. Vandermeer has more up-close and personal, informal style of writing. This can be seen through his choice of point of view, first person, nice observation, and in the conversational inner monologue style of his prose, which focuses strongly on one character and her thoughts. In part 2 of the novel, his main character, the biologist, says, I felt in that moment as if it were all a dream, the training, my former life, and the world I had left behind. None of it mattered before. He frequently uses the character's perceptions to shape the readers. Absolutely. We have a very limited point of view in Vandermeer. Bradbury, on the other hand, follows his characters with a little more distance and formality. His writing is more objective stylistically because it does not focus strongly on a single character's thoughts and feelings. He uses a third-person point of view, which puts a little more distance between the narrator and the characters, giving the effect of watching someone from above rather than seeing through another's eyes. And I feel like this is what The Last Student was kind of getting at also. But I really like this discussion of point of view. Vandermeer, we're very closely following the train of thought of a single person. Where in Bradbury, we don't get a lot of what we call interiority. We don't really know what's going inside people's heads. We're kind of left to watch them act. Lastly, both authors, however, show an ability to personify and give character to the non-human, as evidenced by the various creatures and hinted at consciousness of Area X and the house in There Will Come Soft Rains. Really nice observation. They both frequently use sentence fragments and deal with some similar philosophical concepts. While I liked both readers, if I had to choose one, it would probably be Vandermeer, because he dips more strongly into the cosmic horror, eldritch, weird fiction side of SF, which I found I enjoyed pretty strongly. Super valid, super well reasoned, great response. That's all I have for this week. I look forward to diving into your Area X assignments, and you will start receiving grades on them shortly. Until next time, I will see you. Keep reading, and have a good week.